share the screen now.
Should I turn on my video or is it fine?
No. You are not supposed to turn on your video.
Okay,
You can
fine.
just share the screen and start. Best of luck to everyone.
Is it visible? Hello.
Yes, it is visible. You can start.
Yeah. So I would like to first thank to the organizer of this program to give me this opportunity to present my work, and the nice hosts of this program who are making this program very successful. I would also like to thank my guide and sir, Professor Banibrata Mukhopadhyay, whose guidance have helped me a lot, and his support, and he has always supported me in this uh, to make this theory. Uh, So today I am going to talk about rotating black hole in modified FR gravity. So we would like to first introduce you to the overview. So we'll go first look at Einstein-Hilbert action, then we'll go on to modified Einstein-Hilbert action, and then we'll see a non-rotating asymptomatic solution of this action, and then we'll go to find the rotating solution for this action. And to do this, we'll first incorporate our algorithm known as Newman-Jennings algorithm, and then we'll show the final rotating solution, and then we'll observe different properties of the rotating solution, like the source and singularity, the orbits in equatorial plane, the marginally stable orbits and marginally bound orbits, and innermost stable circular orbits, and we'll also look at the horizons of this metric. So we first start with Einstein-Hilbert action. In the normal theory of GR, the action is represented in this form. But in modified Einstein-Hilbert action, we replace this R, which is the Ricci scalar, by some function of R. There are some bounds on this FR, but I'm not going to discuss it here. Yeah, so by varying this action with some appropriate boundary condition, we'll get the modified Einstein equation in this form. Here f is the derivative of small f with respect to capital R. It can be seen that if f is 1, then we'll get the original Einstein equation. Now, to find the vacuum solution, we will put T mu nu equals to 0. So the RHS will become 0. And from the trace equation, this equation can be found. The detailed calculation are present in these two papers mentioned here. You can go and look at if you want. So if we want to find a non-rotating asymptomatic solution, we will first take a spherically symmetric and static solution, a static metric. So it will be basically a diagonal matrix with a diagonal component as S of R minus P of R minus R square sine square theta. Note that we have taken AR plus minus notation here. And from this equation, this trace equation, these two equations can be easily derived using this metric. The detailed calculation is present in this paper. Here x of r represent this s of r into p of r. Now in a paper of asymptomatically flat vacuum solution given by Surajit Kalita and Professor Banibrata Mukhopadhyay, it has been shown that if such an f of r is assumed, where as r tends to infinity, we get f of r equals to 1, that is at large r we are getting the case of gr. The solution can be found in of this order. Like if we find s of r and p of r, then we are getting the complete metric here. So basically we have solved the solution and we can analyze it. Now we have got the non-rotating solution. Now to find the rotating solution of this metric of this system, we'll incorporate an algorithm known as Newman-Jennings algorithm. So basically what does this algorithm do is incorporate the angular momentum into the metric as a complex parameter of the transformation. So if we put a seed metric of a non-rotating black hole, it can be converted into a rotating solution metric. So here we give a summary of Newman-Jennings algorithm. So first we take the metric in this form, and then we write the null tetrats. And it is known that G mu nu can be expressed in the form of null tetrats in this order. where the bar represent the complex conjugate of the elements. A detailed analysis of Newman-Jennings algorithm can be found in many sources. I prefer this source. You can check this source if you want. So after that, we make a coordinate transformation and write du as a dt minus f dr, where f is of this form. And then we make a complex transformation where u prime is as u minus ia cos theta, r prime is r plus ia cos theta, and theta prime and phi remains the same. We just represent prime so as to for similar notations. This changes the null tetrads as of this form, where we can see that theta have been incorporated and a has also been incorporated. So this a is basically the rotating term coming into the metric. And solving putting the null tetrads in this form, we can find the covariant form of the metric, and then we can always take the inverse and find the contravariate form of the metric in this form. You can always look that here a is present, which is basically the rotating term in the solution. Also here sigma is r square plus a square cos theta, this sigma things here. Now we want to find the rotating solution for the seed metric that we have found in the asymptotically flat non-rotating solution. So it can be easily mathematically done that x of r will be modified to x of r theta in this form, and s of r theta and p of r theta will be of this form. We can always see that this also has this rotating term included in this. Now these two slides, we are basically getting the complete solution of this system, this rotating system. So now we are proceeding to analyze the properties of this solution. So this is basically to find the singularity for this metric. Now it can be seen that the metric will become singular if s of r or p of r becomes singular, and it can be seen easily that s of r and p of r has in the denominator this capital sigma term. So whenever sigma becomes 0, this metric will become singular, and it can be easily shown that this is actually a geometric singularity and not a coordinate singularity. So the singularity cannot be removed by any coordinate transformation. Now, if we build a Cartesian coordinate system, then with the origin at the source, then we can write x, y, z in this form, and the sigma equals to 0 implies that r will be equals to 0 and theta will be equals to pi by 2. So this will lead to x square plus y square equals to a square and z equals to 0. So basically this will form a ring-like singularity where interior of this is will designate a singularity in the metric. So we can see that the ring will be located around the origin in the z equals to 0 plane with a radius of small a. Now we move on to the orbits in the equatorial plane. From the structure of the metric, it can be easily seen that two Killing vectors can be constructed as del t and del phi, and the corresponding conserved quantities will be E and L of this form. And from the metric, we can find E and L to be this, and by solving this two equation, we can write the ut and u phi as this form. Here ut is basically dt by d tau, and u phi is basically d phi by d tau. So yeah. Now we move on to marginally bound orbits. So marginally bound orbits are basically the orbits which are just bound, and any perturbation will lead the particle to go to infinity. So here we define an effective potential as of this form r cube u r square. Now for circular orbits to form, the radial velocity must be equal to 0. So v effective will be 0, and for stability condition, we have to find the extrema, and we also have two other equations, that is a normalization equation and equals to 1. Now solving all these four equations, we can find the radius of the marginally bound orbits. This is termed as RMB, and we can see a plot of RMB here. Note this is not a continuous plot because we have to solve all these 4 equations, and so it was computationally very costly, and so we have just plotted some points so as to like get a feel of the actual data. We can always see that with the increasing magnitude of B, that is variation from the actual GR, the RMB increases. It is like a shift in RMB. A similar pattern can also be seen in RDisco, but let's first see what is RDisco. RDisco is basically the innermost stable circular orbits, such that like anything just in less than RDisco will fall into the black hole. I mean, there will be no stable circular orbits for those particles. So we must incorporate a stability condition, that is this extrema must be a minima. So that is the double derivative must be negative. So we have these 3 equation, and along with this normalization condition, we have 4 equation, and solving this 4 equation, we can find RDisco, and we have plotted the RDisco here. So we see that RDisco increases as B magnitude of B increases. Also, it can be it is known that the interior ring of the accretion disk is limited to RDisco. So any rotating black hole in modified gravity, this RDisco will increase, and so the inner ring of the accretion disk will also increase. Now we move on to horizons. So what are horizons? Horizons are basically the point of no return. So basically, it can be shown that anything beyond this radius will never be able to come outside. So for that, we first define a term as delta of this form, and it can be seen that GRR is equals to minus sigma by delta. So when delta becomes singular, GRR will become singular. So this can be solved to find the RH. This can be numerically solved. Analytically, it is very difficult to get. So here we have done an analytical approximation to get a feel of the RH. So where we have considered B by
Sorry,
R.
Orgo, for the interruption, but
Yeah.
your given 12 minutes are over, so please try to pick up.
Yeah, this is my last slide actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So for B by R2 very small, and we consider only R to the power minus 2 terms. So by this approximation, we'll get RH to be of this form, and it can be seen that in modified GR, mod of A greater than 1 is allowed, which is not at all the case in Kerr metric. So it is kind of allowing A to be greater than 1 and prohibiting the formation of a naked singularity, which would have happened in Kerr metric. So yeah, this marked my end of this. If you have any doubts or question about it, you are free to ask now.
Thank you, Orgo, for a very nice talk. Now we are ready for the question and answer session. And let me see the chat box. The first question is asked by Shomrat Roy. He asks, does this algorithm works for any kinds of black holes, or else does it have some limitations?
No, it will work for any kind of black hole until and unless it is in diagonal form, which is the basic need for this algorithm.
Okay.
And yeah, it can be also shown that. Yeah, it can be also shown that this algorithm gives an unique solution. There are some theorems regarding this. So yeah.
Okay, so he writes, thank you. The next question is from Ashley Chiraya. The question is, have you analyzed the boundary terms which need to be fixed in f of r action? If yes, is there any relationship with the boundary terms which we find in Einstein-Hilbert action?
Have you I mean, it is similar to like Lagrangian action principle.
Okay.
Yeah, the boundary terms.
Okay, so the next question is from Shuloglu. He is asking, what is meant by a ring singularity?
Yeah, so a ring singularity is basically like a disk singularity. So in non-rotating black hole, we see that r equals to 0 correspond to the singularity point, but in a rotating black hole, there will be a disk which will be singular. So there will be a disk, a singular disk. That is why it is called a ring singularity. In the z equals to 0 plane around the origin.
Okay, that's okay. And here is the last question for you, Orgo. Shagnik Bhattacharjee writes, is there any other algorithm other than the Newman-Janice algorithm? And why were two of the parameters taken to be complex?
Which parameters? That is a part of the algorithm, that the r has to be transformed to r plus ia cos theta and to be transformed as ua plus cos theta. So it was like first tried to with from Schwarzschild metric. If you apply this Newman-Janice algorithm, you will get a Kerr metric. So from that, this algorithm got some light, and it can be shown that in any f of r gravity, this algorithm works fine.
Okay, so thank you, Orgo, and you can stop sharing now. You can also share your slides in the Slack channel so that if anyone has any queries, he or she can ask directly to you.
Yeah, sure. Should I stop?
So, yes,
Screen
you
now?
can stop sharing your screen now. Thank you once again. So let me welcome our next speaker, is Aniket Nag from National Institute of Technology, Durgapur. Aniket, are you there?
Yes.
So you can share your screen, Aniket.
Very neat. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Go ahead.
Wait a minute. Yeah. So can you see a full screen?
Yes.
Okay.
The slides are in full screen mode. Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, thank you everyone that give me this opportunity to present my work in this field. So first of all, I just want to introduce myself, that my name is Aniket Nag, and I am a third semester MSc student of National Institute of Technology, Durgapur, and I am working on generalized unscientific principle, and in this particular topic, I am working on the Dirac-Delta potential well and the Dirac-Delta potential bracket also, in collaboration with my senior Sai Pramanik, and under supervision of the HOD of Department of Physics of IIT Durgapur, Dr. Sudev Sahu. So first, I have divided my whole presentation into some chapters. There is the introduction, then the gravitational effect of quantum mechanics, generalized unscientific principle, Dirac-Delta potential, and also the future plans. Okay. So first, I just want to give the introduction that I have already mentioned that my work on the GUP or the generalized unscientific principle. Then you have a question that what is the generalized unscientific principle or GUP? That is a phenomenology of quantum gravity. So now you have a question that what is the quantum gravity? That then if we divide this quantum gravity term simplified manner, then we can get the two terms, that is quantum or quantum mechanics and gravity or gravitational physics. So the quantum mechanics, we know that we did the dynamical behavior of the subatomic particles like electron, proton at very small dimension, and also very small dimension particle like a quark, neutrino, etc. And in gravity, we know that we have two approaches: a Newtonian Newtonian gravity and the Einstein's generality of relativity of GTR. The Newtonian gravity says that this is the attractive force between the massive objects or the celestial objects like sun, star, etc. But the GTR says that this is the gravity, is the curvature of the space-time due to those massive objects. But basically, we know that we are interested to explore the gravity with the GTR, but I am not going to details in it. Now we know there is a limitation of general relativity, and at the vicinity of black hole, and also the neutron star, and also at the subatomic dimension. So we have mathematical tool and we have a theory by which we can explore that subatomic dimension and the weakening of black hole and the neutron star. That is the quantum mechanics. So this is the first reason we can say that. So that is why we are just going to merge the quantum mechanics and the gravity and to give the idea of gravity from the quantum mechanical perspective. So that is all. So that is all. So that is all of the simplified introduction of the quantum gravity. Okay. So before going to my main topic, I just want to show you and explain which is called the COW7, C for Kulia, over Husserl and Warner. They experimented in a neutron interferometer, and they rotate this neutron interferometer on the Earth gravitational field, and they found that due to the interaction due to an interaction of the neutron with the Earth gravitational field, there is a phase shift of the wave function of the neutrons. So after the result, they can find the relation with the phase beta and the rotation angle phi. That is the beta equals to q gravity and sine phi. And if you see the q gravity term without neglecting this g h cut square, we can see this g term is depend on the gravity, and h cut is dependent on the quantum mechanics. So from this experiment, we can merge this gravity and quantum mechanics by the non-relativistic manner. And also the conclusion of this experiment is the gravitational potential coherently changes the quantum mechanical wave function. So this is the first experiment, and this is the first experimentally verification of existence of gravity in the quantum mechanical limit. And this is also non-relativistic. And now from the motivation of this experiment, the three physicists came, Mangano and Mon. They gave a model in 1995, which is a modification of the uncertainty principle using the gravity term beta. Beta is basically dependent on the Planck length, and Planck length is dependent on the gravity term g. And they said that this is the modified generalized uncertainty principle, or we can say this is the modified gravitational uncertainty principle with containing the beta or the gravity term. Okay, now they have already showed the modified counterson relation. Now, if we modify these delta x, delta p, as the modified GUP term, then we can find that approximately this is basically delta x almost equals to h cut by 2 1 by del p plus beta del p. This is the modified GUP, and this is the modified Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Then we just going to plot, and if we plot it, we can see that at a certain range. I mean, after this certain range, there is a deflection with the GUP and the HUP, and before the certain range, there is a domination of the HUP on the GUP. So that is why we are saying this length is called the minimal length, and sometimes this generalized uncertainty principle or GUP is called the minimal length generalized uncertainty principle. Now we just modify the time independent Schrodinger equation into the modified Schrodinger equation by applying the generalized uncertainty principle, and we got a new Hamiltonian that is p squared pm plus p is also there, and with the beta h cut to the power 4 by m. So we just our work to play with this Hamiltonian. So first we just choose the Dirac delta potential due to those uses of the interface of two different regions, a point of obstacle or a fixed point where some mass have concentrated. Okay, so our work to find the variation of the reflection and transmission coefficient at the scattering state in an undergraduate non-relativistic approach for the delta function potential using the GUP. Okay, so we did it. So we take Vx equals to minus alpha delta x as an attractive potential. Then we calculate for bound state E less than 0. Then we can get a normalized wave function and the modified energy, that is that is similar to the unmodified cases, and in the unmodified cases there was k and in the modified cases that k was replaced that k has replaced by this k prime, and k prime is dependent on k and k is dependent on the energy. Okay, so after solving the scattering state for E greater than 0, we got the reflection coefficient R and also transition coefficient T, which is dependent on gamma, and gamma is dependent on the k prime, and we know that the k prime is dependent on k, and k is dependent on the energy. Okay, now we plot this variation of the reflection and transition coefficient taking m or alpha and h cut is equals to 1, and we get these two plots. This is the reflection coefficient plot, and this is the transition coefficient plot with energy. And if you see the red line, this red line is basically the unmodified case using no gravity, and if we use the gravity term beta is equals to 0.01, then we can find this drastic change in the reflection coefficient as well as the transition coefficient. Okay, so if we want to now we are starting to make a physical representation of this change, but as a conclusion we can say that if we use the gravity term as 0.01, we can also find we can also obtain energy where the wave function of the particle is entirely reflected from the real delta potential barrier or the real delta potential well, and also for the scattering state. Okay, so this is the conclusion I accept, and if we just want to theoretically calculate that energy, then we can find EC equals to 1 by 2 m beta. So there is some future plan on which we have started working on double delta potential well and anharmonic oscillator, and also we are interested using the application of GOP on relativistic case, and also for the quantum entanglement and quantum optics. And at last, I just want to say there's an accidental limits of GOP, because already though we are defining the GOP theory, but till now there are some experimental there are no experimental verification on it, because we don't have any apparatus or any device by which we can reach at that Planck scale. Okay, so I have shown some a comparison, that is the LHC of the maximum energy of the LHC is 10 TeV, but the Planck energy is 10 to the power 16 TeV. So from this we can see that we are at least 15 order magnitude away towards this Planck scale, and to experimentally verify this GOP, we have to go towards the Planck scale. Okay, so that's all about my presentation, and that was the so that's a reference from which I have taken this information, and I just want to thank my supervisor, Dr. Sukhdev Sahu, and my senior Sai Pramani, and that's all my presentation. Thank you for listening, and thank you for giving me this time. Thank you.
So very nice talk, Aniket, and let us now head towards the question and answer session. So I can see in the chat box, the first question is from Poulomi Sadhuka. She asks, what happens if you take the relativistic approach? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I have told that till now I don't have any idea, because I have to study on it, and I have told that we are just going to make the research on the relativistic cases, but till now I don't have any idea, because I don't even study on these relativistic cases. This is all about the non-relativistic case.
Okay, so the next question is from Orghoranjan Das. He asks, will considering relativistic instead of non-relativistic effect have any significant changes in the final result? I think Aniket, you have already answered that, right?
Yes, I already answered.
Okay. Okay, so the next question is from Saurabh Ghosh. He asks, why only Dirac delta potential? We could incorporate any other potentials. Can you kindly clarify?
Yes, obviously, because basically these this works is this works is very outdated. Basically, everyone did that work on many different potential, but no one did the work on the Dirac delta potential. So I have already shown that this is the reason. Uh, uh, it's a reason of considering the Dirac delta potential because we can also take the interface of different regions. We can also take the point of obstacle. We can also take the mass have constraint at a fixed point. So that is why we just consider the Dirac delta potential. Uh, that is as our research. That's all.
Okay, that's right. And I can see there are so many questions. The next question is from Shatnik Roy. And he asks, is it possible to get similar phase shift doing any similar kind of experiment like cow experiment using any charged particle like electron?
It's possible to get similar phase shift doing any similar kind of experiment like cow experiment using charged particle like electron. Yeah, basically the experiment is basically doing in the Newton interferometer. Okay, so in the Newton interferometer they did that in Newton beam and they divide the Newton beam and they just see the coherence of the Newton beam. Okay, so if it is also done in an interferometer using the electron particle, then I think if the gravitational effect is also work on the electron, then I think it is possible to find it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So the next question is how do you modify the Schrödinger equation?
Yes.
Equation say inside the black hole. How do we modify the Schrödinger equation? Okay. Basically, here we consider the Planck scale. Basically, in Planck scale, we consider the black hole as a microscopic black hole. Microscopic black hole means we consider that a simplified black hole, like the mass of the black hole is concentrated at a point, and after that, the event horizon of the black hole is the radius of the black hole. Okay, and the radius of the black hole is in Planck scale. So by this approach, we can also consider a black hole, and we can also use the GUP term inside the black hole. Okay, so that is the answer of this question.
Okay, after the next question is from Shayan Chakraborty, and he asks, is this GUP only applied for that high energy cases? Probably yeah, that is the last question.
Yeah, that is a good question because till now we don't have any idea for the low energy because I have already told that we are just considering the GUP application at the Planck scale and every application of the GUP till now the calculation and the application is basically a theoretical, and there is no there is no application in the low energy cases and after the Planck scale. So I think for low energy cases there is no application till now, and we cannot clearly say that we can apply the GUP at the low application. If there is a modified generalized uncertainty principle for low energy cases, then we can find it.
Okay, so Aniket, I do have some questions. I shall ask you later at Slack. Please upload your slides in Slack so that everyone can directly contact you regarding their questions. Thank you once again for the nice talk. You can stop sharing now.
Okay, 1 minute. I just yes. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Let me welcome our next speaker, Ashley Chiraya from Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Mohali. So Ashley, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so you can start sharing your screen now and check.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, your screen is visible. Yes, your screen is visible. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the title of my talk is Tests of General Relativity and Black Hole Spectroscopy with Quasi-Total Modes, which was the work done under Dr. Srijit Bhattacharya at IIIT Allahabad in this summer. So before starting the talk, I would like to thank the organizer for organizing this wonderful event and giving me this opportunity to present my work here. So firstly, I would like to give the overview. So first part of the talk would be just an overview of, the basic introduction of the work I have done, so that each and everyone can be on the same stage, so that I can give the motivation and the aim of the projects in this. And the second part would be a little technical in terms of math. So I would give a simple scalar. I will consider the simple scalar field, and then we'll drive some of the equations there. And in the third part, simply I would take one WKB method, which would be applicable here, and then give out some of the inferences of the results which I have got. Okay, so with this, let's start. So okay, so the as we all know that this is a fairly, famous picture which everyone would have seen of the first gravitational wave detection, which have, just 10 days before it has covered its 50th anniversary. So so in the first column, top left, we can see some of the plots here. The first one is from the Hanford and the other is from the Livingstone. So and in the second row, you can see the waveform models. In the first, it is the gravitational wave data which we have observed at these interferometers, and the second is the waveform models. So now what is happening here is that we divide this gravitational wave data into 3 stages. The first one is the inspiral stage. Now in this inspiral stage is shown in this first part of this diagram. So in this diagram, what is happening is that the amplitude is increasing and also the frequency is increasing. So that is what we are getting at at ground based interferometers. So at black hole stage, what is happening is that the 2 black holes are coming towards each other and inspiraling towards each other. So they are radiating gravitational waves, and due to this radiation, their angular velocity is also increasing, due to which the amplitude and the frequency is increasing in this gravitational wave. And this second phase, where there is a peak here, this is called the merger phase, where the 2 black holes just collide, and there are many non-linear effects happening there. So this is just a peak which we get, and this is the famous chirp sound which you would have known that that at the merger phase, whenever we hear the gravitational waves, there is just a chirp sound which we get, that is of a merger phase. And at the last, there is a ring down phase, that these are just like dying wave solutions. So this is known as a ring down phase. This is due to the black hole emitting gravitational waves and getting stable or unstable depending on the type of background we are considering. So okay, so now as I told that this is the inspiral phase, this is the merger phase, and this is the ring down phase. Okay, so now in this talk I will focus on the ring down phase. Now this ring down phase is well described by perturbing the background black hole spacetime by any test field. So why is this? Because let us assume that we have a black hole, and now it is very unstable and it is giving its gravitational wave radiation. Just at its last phase, when it is giving the gravitational waves and gravitational wave radiations to become stable, we can model this black hole just like that. It is a stable black hole, and in that background we are perturbing that space-time with any test field. With any test field, I mean that we can perturb it with a scalar field or electromagnetic field or gravitational field. So it is assumed that this model is valid only when the black hole is very close to reaching its equilibrium. But the problem is that we don't know at what point will the linear perturbations will start to occur. So this point I will talk later. So this is just a preview. So why are we studying the ring down phase? So first motivation is that by ring down phase, we can get a lot of information about black holes. First is that we can show that the black hole is a stable black hole or not, or it is not a stable black hole. So it is just like a question, like if we have a car at the top of a hill, and if we push it, will it go down? And if the car is at the bottom of a stable peak, will it be stable or not? Just the classical mechanics question. This is the same question we are asking here. So the question is, the question which we will be asking here in black hole in specific this case is that given the initial perturbation, will the perturbations remain bounded at all times or not? So if it is bounded, then we will call that the black holes are stable, and if it's not, then it's not stable. And these calculations and this question was firstly asked by Regge, Tullio, and Wheeler in 1957. So this is the paper. And the second motivation is that we can use this ring down phases for our gravitational wave astronomy so that we can extract and constraint information about black holes, like their mass, spin, and charges. And the third is that we can test general relativity because we have different modes which we get, and by these different modes we can give a stringent test to our GR and say that if a modified gravity theory is required or not. And lastly, we all know that we can confirm black holes by these calculations. So firstly, the aim of my talk is that that there would be a black hole and I would perturb it with a scalar field. So I am taking a scalar field because as a toy model, because taking a gravitational field will make a lot of messy calculations. So for simplicity, I will be talking here specifically about the scalar field perturbations in a Schwarzschild and RN black hole backgrounds. Okay, so firstly, scalar perturbation. So now for scalar perturbation, we all know that we have Klein-Gordon equation for massless scalar in a spherically symmetric and static background as this first equation. And now what we do is that this scalar field, we decompose this scalar field into a radial component, into time harmonics, and this Legendre functions. Now what we do is that we put this equation into the first one, and finally what we get is that and by using the Legendre functions and also using these tortoise coordinates definition, which we all know that is dr by dr star is equal to fh whole power 1 by 2, where f and h are the terms which we get in our spherically symmetric and static background. So at last what we get is this equation in terms of r star coordinates, which is equivalent to our Schrodinger's equation, as you can see here. And here the effective potential is written as this. So one important point I want to tell you here is that here f and h are general. I haven't till now I haven't talked specifically about Schwarzschild or any background. Yeah. So and also I have talked only of the scalar field. But now what we do is that we can take electromagnetic and gravitational perturbations also, like this. I'm sorry. Is my screen visible?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So okay. So till now we have taken any general case. Now what we will do is that we will take a Schwarzschild case where we will take f is equal to 1 minus 2m by r. Okay. Now we have our differential equations, and we know that to solve the differential equation, to get the solutions, we need two things. We need boundary conditions and we need initial conditions. But we all know from our simple wave analysis that boundary conditions are the basic things which will give us the properties of the system. Just like if we have a string, we give our boundary conditions like that both ends are fixed or both ends are not fixed. What we get is a final equation which gives us the properties of that string, right? Here also we need a boundary conditions. By boundary conditions of a black hole, what I mean is that at horizon nothing can leave. So if nothing can leave, the equation, the final solution which we will get is e raised to 1 minus iota m t plus r, right? And for infinity, what we assume is that there are no discarding unphysical waves entering from infinity. So in this case, the wave solution would look like this. Okay, so now we have differential equation and we have our boundary conditions. Now our aim is to solve for eigenvalues and eigenfunctions. But putting the horse before the cart, I would like to tell that the eigen values which we will get are complex values. So this complex, how we will get the complex values is a different issue, and what are the applications of this complex values is a different issue. So I would talk about both. So firstly, as we know that till now I have been talking about only scalar field, but the thing is that even if we take our electromagnetic perturbation or gravitational perturbation, the main equation which we ought to solve is the same equation, where Q is equal to omega square minus Vs. This is the same equation which I have shown before. Now the boundary conditions we have the differential equation, and we have known that this is valid for any massless spin. Okay. So now if it is valid for any massless spin, we can apply our WKB method, because this equation is equivalent to our Schrodinger equation. So as in our quantum mechanics, we do our WKB method, almost equivalent is this, but there would be changes in the boundary conditions and the results which we will get. So the thing is that in WKB method, what we will do is that there would be turning points, right? There would be two turning points. So in the middle region, what we will do is that we will expand Q to different, maximum points. Like we can expand it to the second order, or third order, or sixth order, on any order which we like. So here I have expanded Q to the third order, and using these boundary conditions which I have described earlier, the final result which we will get is this, that n plus half is equal to this. Okay, so now Q naught is our maximum point. Q at maximum I have denoted as Q naught. Okay, so now I have got this condition, and now what I will do is that Q is equal to, I know that Q is equal to omega square minus Vs. Now I know that Q naught is can be found from this.
Sorry for the interruption, but your given 12 minutes are over, so please try to back up.
Yeah. So finally, what we will get is this condition, that omega will be a complex number. First is the imaginary part, and the other is a real number. Okay, so now what I have done is that I have computed these values for gravitational waves first, and I have found these values, and as you can see that the negative is coming, and it shows that the black hole is stable. That is, our Schwarzschild black hole is stable. And as I have told earlier, that the this analysis is also valid for Rn space-time. So for Rn also I have computed this, and I have found that the black hole is a stable black hole. Okay, so now what are the inferences which we can get? The first inference is that we can get the mass of our black hole. Firstly, that we have found our numbers. Now what we will do is that we will convert into physical units, and then we can find the bandwidth. And as we know that the bandwidth of LIGO and LISA, what we know is 10 to few kilohertz for LIGO, and for LISA we have 10 raised to minus 4 into 10 raised to minus 1. So simply putting into the first equation, we can get the mass range of our black holes. And the other thing is the stability, which I have talked earlier. And the last is that we can also make the Eikonal, by getting into the Eikonal limit, we can compute the QNMs in case of our, in terms of a Lyapunov exponent, which is found in our simple Schwarzschild analytics of our test particle. Okay. So lastly, I would like to point out the one open question, which is that we have found our omega values, we have everything, but we don't know the initial time where we should start our observation. So the precise question is that, can we quantify the beginning of the ring down through observations? And this question has been in literature for some years, and many literature is there, and many are doing stuff on this. So these are the references for my talk, and thank you. And any questions, if there are, I would be happy to answer.
So thank you for the nice talk, and let me see the chat box if there are any questions. So Saurabh Ghosh asks, what is the physical manifestation of the boundedness of the perturbations? I mean, what do you physically mean by saying that a black hole is stable or unstable?
Yeah. So the physical interpretation is that if the perturbations are not bounded, then this wave which you are seeing as damped, it won't be damped. So simple, the thing is that the final part of our gravitational wave waveform which we find is the damped phase, and this is what we are getting from our analysis. So this is the physical significance that we should be getting a damped wave, and this is what we find in our waveform.
Okay. And the next question is, Srijit Noshkor asks, why eigenfunctions needs to be damped?
Yeah, so eigenfunctions needs to be damped because the values which we are getting here, like we are getting here minus. So as you know that the first 5 equation which I told, like, yeah, here. So here it is e raised to power minus iota omega t, right? And now in this computation, after computation, what we are getting is this minus value. So if we would be getting this positive value, then the waveform should would not be a damped waveform, because e raised to power minus iota omega t. So if we put this value, the waveform would be exponentially increasing. So this is due to the negative sign which we are getting here, that the waveforms are damped. And this is also the case in Schwarzschild and also in the case of RN black hole.
Okay. So the next question is from Shagnik Bhattacharjee. He asks, let's say if you let's say you have an unstable black hole, does the scalar field perturbation help in achieving stability? Do nonlinear perturbations also have any role in the ring down?
So yeah, the thing is that this is the thing I was talking at last, that we don't know when to quantify the beginning of the ring down, because what we are analyzing here is a linear perturbation. So after merger, at what time the black hole is in its linear stage, that is at what time we can take our linear perturbation theory and apply it. We don't know that. So this is the thing they are trying to find. So one paper, in one paper they are suggesting that, like, we have different modes of this omega values. So what they are doing is that for different modes they are putting these different values at from the starting of the ring down phase. That is, when the merger is ending, they are putting this overtones, and at the last they are putting this fundamental mode, and they are getting the same wave equation. So the result they are finding is that even with LIGO and LISA at this current stage, we are able to find these overtones and fundamental overtone. But still the issue is not clear right now.
Okay, Shagnik writes, thank you. The next question is asked by Shomrat Roy, and he is asking, how would you test the No-Hair theorem with this?
That's Noether's theorem. No-Hair theorem, or I couldn't hear.
Yes, the No-Hair theorem.
Okay, yeah, No-Hair theorem. Yeah, No-Hair theorem. Yeah. So No-Hair theorem, what we will do is that within this GR theory, what we will do is that for the fundamental overtone, we will take this m omega naught and these damped numbers, and we will put in this equation. So by this equation, we will get the mass. So let us suppose that we are talking only about Schwarzschild case, right? So for Schwarzschild case, we will get our mass, because we know our frequency which we are dealing with. We know the m omega naughts and m omega i's. So we will get our mass. Now what we will do is that we will take our first overtone. Now we will put this number in this first equation, and we should be getting the same mass. If we are getting the consistency, then we can say that this GR theory is right, and this is the stringent test. And similarly, we can do it for the Kerr black hole. And RN black hole is not like astrophysically significant, because as you know that black hole doesn't have charges, astrophysical black hole doesn't have charges. So this is the way to test No-Hair theorem. Like, we can test the mass and spin.
Well, that's good. Let me take the last question in the chat box. Shubhobid asks, can you just specify from where the Lyapunov exponent comes? I perhaps missed it.
Yeah. No worries, because I didn't, I mean, explain it because it would take a lot of time. So Lyapunov exponent is just like this is in the firstly, the thing is that this is in the iconal limit. That is, this equation is valid only when we take geometrical optics limit when L is taken to infinity. So this Lyapunov exponent comes from our null orbits. As you know that the null ring is at 3m. So what we do is that we perturb that null ring and we find that if it is a stable or not stable, and there is an analysis of that from Hamiltonian. So after that, what we find is that there is a Lyapunov exponent which says that, uh, I mean, which this exponent tells that if the rate of that trajectories will diverge or converge. So in this specific case, we are talking about null orbit. That will the null orbit be the rate of null orbit will diverge or converge if we perturb that null orbit.
Okay, so that's nice, and thank you once again, Ashley, for the nice talk. I do have many questions from your talk.
Yeah,
you can
sure.
upload it in our Slack channel, so we can discuss it later.
Sure.
You can stop sharing now. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me welcome our last speaker of this theoretical physics session, Ritopriyo Pradhan from Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science, Kolkata. Ritopriyo, are you there?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. You can start sharing your screen.
Yeah. I believe it is visible, right?
Yes, your screen is visible. Go ahead.
So the title of the talk is Can Phase Space in Statistical Mechanics be Subjected to Perturbation Theory? And I did it kind of in this summer. So I shall start with the, just a minute. I shall start with the basic. Can you please? Okay. So I shall start with the basic principles of StatMech. So a large number of particles are moving around, which is giving rise to chaotic dynamics, and that ensures ergodicity, which is to say we can safely assume all of the available phase space, which is constrained by the constant of motion energy, is traversed with equal probability. That's classical StatMech, and the thermodynamic relation comes from A is equal to K log gamma, Boltzmann constant K, S is entropy, gamma is the volume of the phase space, and physical quantities follows from this relation. Now, implementing this method to a problem needs one to calculate the phase space volume and then follow the prescription. But the point is, practical implementation is often impossible. In particular, we use it for trivial systems like two-state systems, free particles, SHO, etc. But non-trivial systems are generally not dealt with. This approach is known as microcanonical ensemble. Some well-known non-trivial systems are van der Waals gas particles with mutual interaction, and maybe some potential with two parameters in phi giving rise to a scale. So these are some non-trivial systems, and what we do for these systems, we first obtain canonical or grand canonical ensemble from microcanonical ensemble and apply those to the system. But is it then impossible to apply microcanonical ensemble directly to the non-trivial system? It turns out no. So we shall show how to apply it to a system with a scale. Now we want to calculate gamma, and the intelligent procedure comes from invoking delta function. So this is the Hamiltonian kinetic plus potential energy, which is a constant of motion. Now gamma is this. So gamma is this, and this is just a factor to keep the dimensions correct. Phase space degeneracy factor. So we shall take that part of phase space where the total energy is equal to E. This is how I invoke the delta function, and then redefine E bar as E minus potential energy to write it like this. Now this portion we identify with the surface area of n-dimensional hypersphere of radius 2m E bar. after some rescaling, and that answer is known to us. So 2 pi to the n by 2 by gamma n by 2 into 2m e bar to the n minus 1 by 2, and we do that and replace the real value of e bar, and we have used the approximation n is quite larger than 1. So we are here. Now when phi x is just phi x has just one power, it is easy to tackle, but it's difficult when it has mixed powers. So first we shall look at the easier case. In this case, we have to solve this integral, and it is doable. We define a series of energies like this. So E1 is E minus this summation starts from 2 to n. As you can see, due to that, this quantity is same as E1 minus kx1 to the n. So write it like that and integrate over x1 first, and you shall get this. Just binomial expansion and integration, nothing more. And carrying out this way, we can carry out all the integrations, and the final result which I get is this: a string of beta functions and this. So then we invoke the approximation that n is very large, and then entropy, as you can see, turns out to be extensive, which is important. I mean, the delta function does not affect the dimension of the thermodynamic quantity, of course, in the large n limit. So as you can see, this is also intensive minded because it is ratio of two extensive quantities. So consistent. And next, follow the prescription, and you shall get the specific heat to be just what we get. I mean, for two special cases, for example, SHO, n equal to 1, nkb, perfect, and n equal to 2, 3 by 4 nkb, perfect. So the method works. Now we shall go to the harder case. Now the general case is even harder to solve. So we shall work in the limit. So lambda small, if lambda is small, we shall expect that specific heat is around nkb, which is basically SHO. And when omega is small, we shall expect it to be near this. The dimensionless parameter at play is this, as you can see, when lambda is small, mu is less than 1, I mean very much smaller, and we expect a correction in the specific heat in terms of the mu. And when omega is small, the mu will be large, so the correction will be in terms of 1 by mu. My screen is visible, right? And I'm audible.
Yes, Ritu, we can see your screen and hear
Okay, thank you.
you as well.
So first we shall solve this mixed potential problem using canonical ensemble, and show how exactly the same results are produced when microcanonical ensemble is used. So the canonical ensemble has this funda. So canonical partition function and single partition function related to the system's partition function. Helmholtz free energy relates like this, and specific it is related to F like this. Well, know that and for small lambda, we have to calculate this single particle partition function. The momentum integral is carried out independently. Then for the position integration, we just expand this lambda guy e to the minus lambda guy using the Taylor expansion of e to the x, because lambda is small, and then just algebra, and we get this final result. Then follow these prescriptions, you shall get specific heat like this. So the answer as expected is in terms of mu, which is a small which is a small value for small lambda. This is how we get. Next is the small omega case, and in an exactly same manner, once I'll get this answer. 3 by 4 nkb, as you can see, the leading term, and the correction is in terms of 1 by mu. So everything is all right. Now, what is microcanonical ensemble to say to us? First, small lambda case we shall look first, and we have to do this. We are up to this right now, but the problem is there are mixed powers, so it is in general difficult, but perturbation says we can expand this thing binomially. So do a binomial expansion of that thing. Take this part of the story common from the whole thing, and you shall get this. And here is the approximation: 1 plus x to the n is 1 plus nx n plus n into n minus 1 by 2 factorial x square. We just keep the linear term. So the original integral breaks down into two parts. J1 is just this part, and J2 is with this part. So as you can For J2, as you can see, the name doesn't matter. So there is a symmetry in this integral. And by that symmetry, we take out a factor of n, and it's enough to work with one variable. We choose it to be x1. So first we shall integrate over x1, and once again we shall integrate over x2, x3, and x4. And the e1, e2, e3, these are defined in the previous way as we did in the earlier case. So it's a doable integral. The integration turns out to be this. Finally, J2 turns out to be this. So we have J2 and J1 that will give us gamma. So this is gamma. As you can see, this is the portion of the constant factor of the J1 which is taken out. Note that J2 has e to the n plus 1 and J1 has e to the n. So E is left out. And then this part is just algebra ratio of the two constant factors of J2 and J1, which after evaluation comes this. Now the multiplicative constants that are appearing here are not quite important. They are just ensuring that entropy is extensive, that is big of n. And as you can see, A is k log gamma. So this is a function of n, then n kb log E, and then kb log 1 minus 3/4 of this term. And because lambda is small, we approximate as log of 1 plus x is approximated to x. So we keep just this. And then 1 by T is a derivative which is doable. E is expressed in terms of temperature, and then once again it goes upward. There is an inverse and binomial expansion because lambda is small. So this, and then specific, it turns out right. Exactly the same answer, but we have got for in the canonical ensemble case. Similarly, we can work out the small omega case just using microcanonical ensemble, nothing else. We shall not repeat the calculation, but the exactly same result will be produced. So we saw how microcanonical ensemble can be directly applied to non-trivial system. Here we have done the harmonic oscillator to obtain correct results without appealing to canonical or grand canonical ensemble. The reason this approach is generally not taken is its calculational complexity, as was evident throughout the slide. But the use of Dirac delta function made an excellent way to take this approach without affecting the extensive nature of entropy. Do I have time? Then I shall go back to that slide.
Yes, you have probably near about 2 minutes of time.
Okay, I know. I mean, it's just about justifying whether this binomial expansion is correct to do. So, because n is quite large. Now, mathematically, I can say that lambda is a perturbation after all, and it can be infinitesimal, so everything is all right. But practically, lambda is not infinitesimal. But as you have seen, the result suggests us that the result should be working in a good manner if the mu parameter is quite smaller than 1, which doesn't necessarily imply lambda is infinitesimal. But if you look at this part, we are taking out E, and this ratio is like mu. So basically, as if the expansion is wanting us to have mu n less than 1. How do we justify the expansion then? I mean, for general case, this may not be true. Well, this can be this circumstance can be thought of as the following. I am not giving the exact quantities, just big of things are kept similar. So we have a quantity gamma which is related to some extensive quantity e to the n, and there is a multiplicative factor of 1 minus r to the n. So where r is less than 1 and it works as the perturbation. Now the fact is, at the end of the day, we have to look at the entropy and look at the entropy correction due to the introduction of lambda. So we want to look at the first order effect of r on log of gamma. And that is perfectly okay because log of gamma is just this, and because log E is greater than 1, this approximation is absolutely valid. So this is the correct answer. But what we have done and what is little unsatisfactory is we have expanded this guy in a binomial expansion, as if this seeks us that Rn is less than 1. For the moment, keep it there. If we do this binomial expansion and take a log, and if we approximate this again log 1 plus x to be x, then we shall get exactly the same answer. So though it seems Rn is less than 1 is mathematically seeking but as you can see, this way somehow gets to the correct result. So this gave us the courage to expand that binomial expansion, though n was quite large. And as we have seen already, we have got the correct result. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Ritupriyo, for the nice talk, and it's time for the question and answer session. Let me see the chat box. Saurabh Ghosh is asking why this the specific form of phi of x.
Sorry, which form did you mean?
I think he is meaning the form of phi of x, that is kx to the power 2n, which
Yeah,
you have considered.
So
I guess.
yeah, as I've so as you can see, basically this is not the completely general form, but this is quite a good general form to take care of all these well-known cases, like the SHO is coming when n equal to 1, when n equal to 2, it's x to the 4. So these are some standard things, and also this is just a evaluation of an example, but that shows us that delta function does not touch the dimensions of the things, and it works out this case correctly. So there is no particular thing that this is the only form.
Okay, so I think that is probably for the obtained the standard results which you have obtained already in equals 1 or 2,
and of course
that is the standard mathematical form.
Yeah, and of course this algebra will justify why the next case the case is extensive, because there is the same multiplicative factors there.
Okay, so that's right. The next question is from Shubhobir. He is asking why x to the power 4 perturbation in phi of x. Any physical reasoning to choose that form?
I mean, anharmonic oscillator is a well-known problem. So just that. I mean, it's just showing the power of microcanonical ensemble. That is the objective. That microcanonical ensemble can be directly used for a hard case like this, where this is not trivial. Just, I mean, anharmonic oscillator is just a well-known example. And it is obviously case specific.
So if there is no more questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So if there are no more questions, let me ask some queries of mine. That is, Ritupriyo, you have considered here the anharmonic potential, right? That is x to the power 4 term added with harmonic potential term.
Right.
I am just wondering, you are seeking the non-trivial cases. What if you choose a potential like Mexican head potential, or a potential which is slowly varying, mainly slowly varying as a function of x? What about those?
Slowly
or a discontinuity.
Sorry, slowly varying means what?
I mean to say that thought of a potential which has a discontinuity, like a Mexican head potential. Can we apply the same treatment for the case?
Yeah, the point is this is, as you can clearly understand, completely case specific. I mean, this is general up to this step. I mean, up to this step, this procedure is general. You have to come to this step and put the whatever potential you have, and then how you shall go really depends on the potential. I mean, it's good to have a perturbation parameter, because then it is doable. Otherwise, I'm not sure. Like as I have told already, I mean, the potential I have taken, the general solution is really hard.
That is probably the mathematical calculation.
Mathematical complexity completely.
This form which you have. Yeah. Which you have considered sigma of n. I am just thinking one more query, that is the binomial expansion which you have seen at the last of your talk, that is actually not in the last, in the middle of your talk.
In the middle,
the binomial expansion of the energy, right? I am just asking, you are considering r less than 1. So what if there are so many conditions? Is it choice specific, or are you just choosing it for the simplification?
No, I have shown this for my choice, which is the anharmonic oscillator case. As you can see here, the for the small lambda, the point is mu is less than 1. So why should I have mu into n less than 1? Which, as if the mathematics of binomial expansion seeking to me. And why not mu less than 1 is enough? So it is actually enough, and that justification I showed in the slide. It's completely choice specific.
Okay, that's right. Yeah. That's right. So thank you once again, Ritupriya. Nice
Thank
talk.
you. I thank you to, I mean, all of you to give me the opportunity to present this.
Yeah, thanks again. So you can stop sharing now, and if anyone has any questions, he or she can directly.
Someone has raised his hand.
Hello.
Someone raised hand.
Someone has
Please.
raised his
Okay. Sorry, let me take it. I think Shulagno. You can unmute yourself, Shulagno. No problem.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, is there any programming language to solve this statistical problems? So can you put some like?
Yeah, I mean, programming will be necessary if we want more higher order corrections. So that is possible, because at the end of the day we have to solve an integral, nothing else. So that is not impossible. But that is not objective of my talk. I just wanted to show that microcanonical ensemble is more powerful than it looks. But yes, I mean, an inclusion of computer programming will help us to give higher order corrections to the specific heat which we can expect to be correct.
Okay, I think that's okay. Shulagno, do you have any other queries?
No, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
So
thank
Ritupriya, thank you once again.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions, he or she can reach you out. You can stop your sharing.
Oh, thanks a lot.
So we are at the end of our session, and let me formally end this session and hand over the mic to Oishorjo Tarokdar. So over to you, Oishorjo.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank all the participants for their amazing talk, and for people in this discussion can do so in the Slack channel. We shall end this session over here. Now I'm handing over the mic to Shomodip Kundu. Over to you, Shomodip.
Hello, I would like to thank Oishorjo and Shovigda and also Samratda for the sessions conducted by you or as chaired by you today. And this is the end of our UG symposium, and we are heading towards the end of precision, but we have a public lecture by Adam D. Myers at 8:30 p.m. and it is the last event of this year's precision. I like to invite everyone to attend this session, and let me just display once the event in the evening time. I will like to invite everyone to attend this session, and this is from 8:30 p.m. of course IST, and let us end this session for now. Thank you.